We'll dive into all the Eagles, the NFL, with 97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles and NFL Insider John McMullen here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. John, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Break up with your bookie. Harrah's Resort, Bally's, Atlantic City, Wild Wild West are taking bets at our new sports books. Wager today at the book. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. As we go to Johnny Mack. He's in the house right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. John, what's happening, my man?
Doing well. How are you, Mike?
All is well. I saw your tweet 1 minute before you came on the show here. Mike Wallace still wearing a walking boot, right foot, said he's feeling better. I bring that up because we have talked about the Mac Hollins, Mike Wallace, Rodgers tight end and their timeline. What is the timeline with Mac Hollins and Richard Rodgers?
Well, it's interesting you say, because those two players were out on a separate field today during practice working with the trainers, and Sidney Jones was in that group as well. So they're a lot closer than Mike, who's still in the walking boot. So it sort of comes down to a decision in which you can only bring two of them back, in which two would you want to bring back? I think at some point I've said pretty consistently, and I still believe it, Richard Rodgers will be one of those two. So then it comes down to the two receivers and whether you want to wait for Mike Wallace, because Mac Hollins is going to be able to help you more quickly. And I think the second part of that is if Golden Tate comes in here and proves effective, maybe the Eagles think they can wait for Mike Wallace. If it's not as effective and they still need a deep threat, maybe they want to pull the trigger on Mac Hollins.
And that would be interesting. Wallace, if he was able to come back, let's say for the playoff run right around then, if you were lucky enough to get to that spot, what you do with Aguilar. If you have Wallace, Tate, and Alshon, that's a pretty nice, formidable trio.
Yeah, I mean, and I think ultimately, I think Tate, Jeffrey, and Aguilar, I think are going to be fine. I think that's going to be very helpful to this team because I think people don't realize Golden can play outside as well, and he's played more outside than inside, and he's played it very effectively. People tend to look at him. He's 5'11". There's very few 5'11" receivers who are good on the outside. He's one of them.
Would you compare him to, I don't want to say Steve Smith. Steve Smith's probably a Hall of Famer, but that type?
Yeah, a little bit.
Steve Smith was like the Darren Sproles of wide receivers, like this short, stocky, strong, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's incredibly strong in the lower body, so that's where that comparison comes in. He was a running back before Notre Dame shifted him to receiver back in college. You're not going to see a receiver break more tackles than Golden Tate. He just has that running back mentality. Typically, let's be honest, no matter who the receiver is, you don't see them breaking a ton of tackles. He's a little bit different in that way.
John, let's look at the injury report today and try to forecast it down the road. Sidney Jones, you think you see him Sunday night?
No, he's not playing against the Cowboys. His hope is to be back for the Saints. And he was working off to the side with Mac Hollins and Richard Rodgers with the trainers. But he indicated to Les Bowen, actually, so I'll give Les a shout-out, that he's hoping to play against the Saints. So although the Eagles aren't going to tell you he's out, he's not going to play this week.
Another name did not participate. Haven't seen this one. Jason Kelce, not injury related, but I think it was you that tweeted that, he had some knee issues earlier in the year, and is this related to that?
No, it's not, and that was the concern when we went out to practice and he wasn't there. You immediately go through that because early in the season he was dealing with a knee injury, and you saw him have trouble with some of the things he usually does really well, getting to the second level. That's because he had this nagging knee injury. But it was a personal matter. It's not injury related, so that's a positive. Could have been a rest day. I don't know why they would want to give him a rest day coming off a bye. So it's probably more in the personal matter aspect. But he was on a different radio station earlier today, so it's no concern. He's expected back at practice tomorrow, and he's online to play against the Cowboys.
Jalen Mills with the foot problem. We anticipate, Sidney Jones already out, and Jalen Mills most likely with him?
Yeah, and that's going to be the big difficulty of this game because you're going to be down two of your starting three cornerbacks, and it's sort of what do you do? And I think it's pretty evident what they're going to do on the outside. They're going to move Ronald Darby over to the left side where Jalen Mills usually plays. Rasul Douglas is going to play right corner. And then it comes down to who do you want in the slot. And Corey Graham was back at practice today. So that plays into it as well. Perhaps they can start him at safety and put Avonte Maddox back in the nickel, or they just signed Cre'Von LeBlanc, who they picked up on waivers also from Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
He's been a slot corner in the past. That's what he does. Now, people say they signed Dexter McDougal, he's replacing on the roster, and he started straight off the street, and that's true. But remember, there is a little bit of a difference in that McDougal was here for a half year before getting cut and knew the system coming in, whereas LeBlanc is coming into a completely new system. So I'm not sure you just want to throw him out there with 3 days of practice.
Obviously, Sproles is at the, he was at practice today, limited participation, but they made the move for DeAndre Carter last night, kind of clearing the way, and it sounded like Doug Peterson today indicated that, yes, indeed, they will have Darren Sproles back.
Yeah, he's going to play, and that was the clear unless there's a setback, and you can never say never in this league, but that was evident, as you mentioned, the minute they waived DeAndre Carter, who has been the punt returner. You knew Darren Sproles was coming back. He's going to return, and he's going to be the punt returner. And I think as long as he's healthy, he's going to be the main guy in that committee approach. And in key situations, he's going to be the running back on the field. I don't think there's any question about that.
I agree with you there. John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN, at JF McMullen. Corey Graham, limited. If he's ready to play, is he the starter, or do they go back to using him in the role that he was pretty good in last year?
Well, that enters the Sidney Jones part, enters into that. I think if Sidney was healthy, he would go back to the role he was effective in last year as the third safety. But now you need a nickel corner, and you don't have Dexter McDougal. Sidney's not going to play. And as I mentioned, you just brought in Cre'Von LeBlanc. So somebody's got to play nickel corner. You can do it in a number of ways, but the easiest way to me and the most common sense thing to do would to put Avonte Maddox back into the nickel slot. He was the backup before they were forced to move him to safety and have Corey Graham start. It's going to be tough. As I said, they're down two of their three starting quarterbacks, so there's going to be some moving parts. Best guess would be Corey starts at safety and Avonte Maddox is the nickelback.
Then there's Lane Johnson, John. I mean, we're going down the list, and these are key guys. Lane Johnson, I know that Brandon Brooks said, he's tough as nails. He's going to be – it sounded like Stoutland yesterday wouldn't question him playing. His teammates today – did you see him? I saw some video at JF McMullen to go look at Lane Johnson. I saw some video on your Twitter today kind of looking like he was out there with the guys.
Yeah, he took first-team reps in individual drills. He didn't work in team drills from what everybody was saying in the locker room after. But this is a clear, Doug basically said they expect him to play. Jeff Stoutland said yesterday he thinks he's going to play. Everybody talks about Lane's toughness. He's wearing the knee brace. He was out there. I certainly know he wants to play, and I think they expect him to play. But this is an injury that usually keeps you out for 4 weeks. And he's essentially trying to come back in 2 weeks. That bye helps. And I always say Lane is one of those guys you can look at typical timetables and you understand he's going to try to come back before. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he plays, but you got to keep an eye on it. And I also think the Eagles have to be, maybe players always want to play, and maybe you got to pull the reins. He wants to be out there against DeMarcus Lawrence. I think they want him out there against DeMarcus Lawrence because they don't envision Big V having much success against a player like that. But I think you have to weigh both ends of it and say you don't want him to tweak it and get injured further. It's going to be an interesting decision, but if Lane gets his way, he's going to be out there.
Yep, and we talked a lot about what they might do if he doesn't play, but let's get that for first. John McMullen with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Darren Sproles, real quick, he was at practice. The expectations he'll be able to play. Will he be the punt returner this week?
Yeah, there's no question about that. Dave Fipp has said consistently that when he's cleared, he's the punt returner. So even if DeAndre Carter was still here, he would be the punt returner. Obviously, he's not here on the active roster. So he's the punt returner, and there's no surprise. He should be the punt returner. He's one of the best punt returners that ever lived.
How acclimated does Golden Tate feel?
What was that? Sorry.
How acclimated does Golden Tate feel?
Well, I mean, I don't know how acclimated you can be. I think people don't realize in the bye week, and everyone talks about extra time, that's sort of like extra time for coaches. Through the CBA, the players get the week off. It's not like he was practicing. They had a walkthrough Monday. This was their first full-scale practice on Wednesday. So he's got 3 practices to get ready. Now you see the way the rest of the league is going, and Demaryius Thomas in Houston played a lot. Amari Cooper played a lot. He's going to play, and he's a good player, and they didn't give up a third-round pick for him not to play. So they're going to have packages for him, but obviously you can't learn an entire new offense that quickly. So it's going to be limited, but they're going to have packages in for him, and I think you're going to see him get some traffic because he's a playmaker, and that's what they've needed on this offense.
I mean, Amari Cooper was implemented right away. You could make an argument, John, that he was the most prepared and best player on the field for them the other night. And he only had and so you would anticipate that Tate is going to be fully out there, right?
Yeah, and if you don't know, I mean, you're not going to be able to tell that he doesn't know the entire offense. And also understand Golden Tate is a really, really smart player, high football IQ. He understands offenses better than most receivers in this league. So he's going to get up to speed faster than most. But still, there's nobody on the planet that can go into a new building and learn an entire offense, especially an offense like this, in 3 days. Now, he's had the playbook, he's had more time, and he's been studying it. But again, no on-field work. You can't do that during the bye week. So it's tough, but others have done it. You mentioned Cooper, and I mentioned Demaryius Thomas. They got traded, and they were right on the field. So he's going to play, and he's going to play a lot.
Now, Doug was asked today about how the skill sets of him and Aguilar are similar, different, how they work together. He said, well, that's the chess piece that they need to kind of work on. But do you see those guys playing together or rotating?
I think they'll play together. I think when the Eagles use 11 personnel, which is 3 receivers, it'll be Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar, and Golden Tate. The issue is who's on the outside. I think it will be Tate, although that might rotate because Nelson has more deep speed. Although I don't, we talked about that a lot. I don't think he's effective. I think the difference is when you play 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, then it becomes 2 receivers, and then it's Alshon Jeffrey and Golden Tate. It's not going to be Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar. So I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, like I was wondering, is he going to lose? What's Aguilar's snap count? What percentage of the snaps does he typically get? And is that going to go down now?
Yeah, it is. He plays a lot, and he plays right there with Jeffrey, same type of percentage week to week, because they're the two receivers that are always on the field. I think that changes now, and maybe it's incremental. Maybe it's not full-blown week one, but by the second or third week Golden Tate is here, he's going to be the receiver on the field when they only have two receivers. It's going to be Alshon. It's going to be him.
Would you have had interest in Amir Abdullah?
No, I not.
He just signed with the Vikings, by the way, but just would you have had interest?
No, he was the Lion. He was with the Lions.
Right, no, I'm saying he just signed with the Vikings.
Oh, he just signed with the Vikings. No, I didn't see that.
It just happened.
I would not have happened. I would not have been interested here. I think that would change if Darren Sproles wasn't able to go. That's sort of a redundancy, sort of a third down scat type back, and he's not nearly as effective, or at least he hasn't been in his career catching the football, pass protection. A lot of young running backs have issues with that. Darren's obviously at the end of his career, he knows how to do all that. If he was no longer here, I would say, yeah, take a flyer on him because he's got talent. But I don't see where he would fit in here as long as Darren Sproles is here.
John McMullen with us here at Boardwalk Honda Hotline. You asked Doug today about the explosive offense around the league. They're spreading the football around, and about whether or not they have the personnel now to do that, to be the team. That's what they did last year, John. They spread it around. Ertz, Jeffrey, Aguilar. They handed it off. I mean, they got it to the guys in a variety of ways. Does he feel that this offense is now more complete for the second half of the year?
Yeah, he does, and I kind of screwed up that question, but Doug got it. So to his credit, I give him credit. What I meant to say is not necessarily spread it around, or that's important, but they spread the field, and they play 11 personnel, and sometimes they play 4 receivers. And if you see the Rams and Saints, that's what they do. They're always trying to spread defenses out, and that's what the Eagles did last year. But this year, because of all the injuries, they've had to play a lot more 2 tight ends, a lot more 3 tight ends offense, and that's just harder to do. Things get constricted on the field. It's harder to move the football. The explosive plays come down, and Doug wants to get back to what they were last season, and that's spreading the field, spreading the defense out, and I think they're closer to being able to do that now.
Right now, all right, Washington loses, Dallas loses. You got this feel that the division's right there. You got Washington this week. What do you see a more business-like Eagles team coming out of this bye?
Well, I see a team, and Doug kind of even touched on this, and I wrote about it on 973ESPN.com. I see a team that understands things are breaking their way. I joked about it, and that's the most productive bye week I've ever seen a team have. It has nothing to do with what the Eagles did, although they did make a big move in getting Golden Tate. It's just what happened to Washington and what happened to Dallas.
Yeah.
And not just the losses.
That re-energizes everything, man.
Yeah. Washington loses both their starting guards for the season. They lose their deep threat at receiver for the season. The Cowboys lose Sean Lee. It was just unbelievable, the attrition. The two teams they're going to be fighting for this NFC East title with suffered in the week they're off, and then all of a sudden they come back to practice today, and Darren Sproles is out there, and Lane Johnson is going to try to play, and Corey Graham is out there, and Sidney Jones says he's going to play next week at least, so he's coming down the road. Richard Rodgers is getting closer. Everything's breaking their way.
Yeah, some vibes are turning in the Eagles' direction. My favorite question of the day, though, Will Jordan Mailata get a couple carries?
Well, you know what? Doug perked up. I thought it was a silly question, but he did perk up, and he had some fun with it. I think ultimately, and I joked about this that first game he dressed, where I said if Doug gives him the football, it's going to be the biggest thing in Philadelphia sports history because everybody wants to see it. I think ultimately at some point you're going to see it.
Really?
I do.
Which I don't find to be so bizarre. Like, this is what this guy's background. Why can't someone take the chance and say, you know what? Yes, I get it. This guy's 300 pounds. He's 6'5". But you know what? This is what he is. Maybe he is a running back.
Well, he's not a running back. I mean, let's be honest. There's a difference between NFL players and, League Two rugby players in Australia who are all 150 pounds lighter than Jordan Mailata. I mean, I was just talking to Deuce Staley yesterday about Josh Adams, who's this tall running back. And the knock on tall running backs is they always get hurt because they don't have a low enough pad level. Well, you start talking about pad level with a 6'8" guy.
Yeah.
And you start talking about leverage.
That dude would run through you.
Well, I'll tell you, let's put it this way. If Jordan Mailata's running the football and Bobby Wagner's the middle linebacker, you might say one's 360 and the other one's 240. I guarantee you the 240 guy is going to blow him up because the 240 guy knows leverage.
Yeah. It would be fun to see. It would be so Philadelphia. Give it to the 350-pound
I think
tackle.
You're going to see it in a trick play. I mean, Doug loves trick plays.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think at some point you're going to see him line him up as a fullback, and they're going to try to hand the ball or throw it and ignite the crowd. But it's not going to be a consistent thing.
Today, you got a chance to hear from Jason Garrett on the conference call. He was asked about Troy Aikman's comments, that they need to reshuffle everything out there. Was he taken back?
No, I mean, he claimed he didn't hear the comments. Then we told him what
your
the
ass
comments
itches. You
were.
didn't hear the comments.
Yeah, I exactly. But, I mean, that's Jason Garrett. He is what he is, and he's one of those coaches.
Those comments are probably being played on repeat in that building.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I always say the Dallas Cowboys' problems are not Jason Garrett's issues because Jason Garrett isn't really the coach of the team.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the power of the typical coach. I joked the conference call, and I said we should ask the Cowboys for the actual coach, not the figurehead coach, because the guy, he had the ability to call plays at one point. That was stripped from him.
Right.
He was told to hire Chris Richard as this sort of convoluted title and demote Rod Marinelli. So Rod Marinelli no longer calls the defensive plays. Chris Richard does.
I thought Marinelli called the plays like from 20 to 20, and then Richard called the plays in the red zone.
Well, as I understand it, Richard is now calling all the plays.
Okay.
Although, you may be right. I mean, nobody knows what goes on from week to week because it's Jerry Jones.
Right.
I mean, and that's the whole point.
I could see him flipping a coin on each down and saying, it's your turn.
Yeah, he's told what to do. And Jason Garrett, now, there's only 32 of these jobs. And no matter what, if you put head coach Dallas Cowboys on your resume, that's pretty impressive just from the outside world. So I don't blame him for not walking away. But he's not a traditional coach. Let's just put it that way.
Des Bryant with the Saints. What do you think of that move?
I think it's a great fit for him. He goes into a team with a Hall of Fame quarterback. They're a great team. Michael Thomas has turned into a top 5 receiver in this league, so he's never going to see a double team. He's going to see single coverage. He's not used to that from his years in Dallas. But as I've said a lot on this show, people see Des Bryant and they go, wow, it's not the old Des Bryant.
No, but I think he's a great fit for what they need out there. Yeah,
I mean, they need an outside receiver. That was sort of an underreported story. Everyone says, wow, look at the Saints, but they lost Ted Ginn. They had nothing on the outside after Michael Thomas. So they need a receiver. I think it is a great fit. And as long as he understands he's a complement, he's the second receiver, things will be fine. I think it'll work out.
Worst third down passer in the league, Dak Prescott. He comes to Philly Sunday night. You can hear the game right here. 97.3 ESPN. Countdown to kickoff coverage begins 5 o'clock. John McMullen, you're the man.
Hey, thanks, Mike.